Thank you, Ruth, and Rabbi Margolin, and the distinguished representative of Hungary, Mr. Shale Borvanitsky. And all of you here on the dais with me. I'm honored to be with all of you. Thank you for making this possible. I have a lot to say to you. I would like to begin on a light note, given that the Hungarian minister is here. I was in Hungary first, perhaps before he was born, under János Kádár, and I had a very difficult time with his language. Hungarian is a challenge for non-Hungarians. I arrived in Budapest on one of these very fast boats going from Vienna. And it's only, I think, an hour ride, if I recall. And I needed, at the time, I needed the men's room when I boarded. I was 23 or 24 years old. And I thought, well, it's not a problem. I'll just utilize the one on this hydrofoil. But there was none on the hydrofoil, which everyone else knew except me. We arrive in Budapest, and I'm in some pain, but I have to go through communist customs to make sure I wasn't bringing in Time, Newsweek, or Playboy. And so that took another half hour, 45 minutes, and I was in real pain. I finally walk out to a main street, and to my great relief, I realize I don't have to know Hungarian. It says WC. I walk over to this little building that says WC, thrilled that I found it, only to be confronted with two doors. Over one door it said Nok, and on the other it said Furfiak. And let me just say that I didn't really know if I was a Nok or a Furfiak. And this predates the dates of gender fluidity. I did not know. And I looked for an umbrella and a skirt, stick figures, nothing, just Nok, Furfiak. So I stood in the street and I stopped passersby, and here I am, 6'4", American, 20-something years old, going, hello, Nok, Furfiak? Do you realize what these people must have thought of me? This giant American asking them, are you a man? Am I a man or a woman? And I do not blame them for not answering. Most ran away. And finally, I just figured, look, I can't handle this any longer. Furfiak sounds like female. I'll go into Nok. And sure enough, there were some women in there who then started screaming at me as well. And forever I will know that I am a Furfiak. I actually had a wonderful time there. I've been to Hungary a number of times, both free Hungary and communist Hungary. I want to comment on a few of the things that were said and then speak to you about freedom generally. I got the message making the case for freedom. I see human rights and free speech in Europe today as the subtitle. I will talk about freedom and free speech, but freedom as a larger component, or freedom of speech as a component of the larger issue of freedom. I just want to react to a few things. Mr. Skripek cited the biblical verse, fear not. You might find it of interest to know that the thing that God says in the Bible the most to humans is fear not. And it's too bad that that message was not conveyed, for example, to conservative organizations that backed out of the sponsoring of me because they live with fear. And one of my, I have two lessons about this that I apply my whole life to, and in all of my radio shows and videos and so on. Number one, that the greatest asset of fearing God is that you don't fear man. Amen. That is one of the greatest reasons for fear of God as a very important moral concept. In my own life, those who know me know this is true. I only fear God. I don't even fear the New York Times, which in the United States is a much greater fear It is. It is a much greater fear in America than fear of God. It's not even a question. And that is one aspect. The other is that the rarest of all the good traits, there are many good traits in humans: kindness, loyalty, integrity, honesty, but the rarest is courage. And without courage, the others are useless. And conservative organizations around the world have not demonstrated courage in many instances, and this would be just one of those examples. I don't even know what they stand for, to be honest. If I cannot be sponsored by a conservative organization, who can? I have not uttered a hateful word in my life, and there are millions of words of mine available. 10 books, 30 years of column writing, and 35 years of radio 3 hours a day. That's a lot. I mean, you can catch anybody on anything, but I'm not catchable. I've never said a bad word. I've never said a false word of which I am aware. I'm committed to truth as a God-demanded value. And I just looked now. What did they write about me to scare away a conservative organization from sponsoring this? I put out a video at Prager University where we have 1 billion views a year, and the great majority are under 35 years of age, so this bothers them. I'll tell you who the them is in a moment. And one of the videos it says, we laugh at this one, he wants you. I have a video about having read in a British newspaper that couples have more fights when they take vacations going to the beach than vacations going elsewhere. Why? Because on the beach there are many women in bikinis, and the husband or the boyfriend is caught looking at them. So I decided, because I have devoted much of my life to helping people, that's why I have a happiness hour on my radio show, a book on happiness. I have an hour every week called the Male-Female Hour, where I try to help men and women get along better. And the thesis of my video is, yes, he looks, but he wants you. You, his girlfriend, you, his wife. And all it does is help couples have less tension. And these fools that wrote this stuff against me use that as a source. They didn't even say what's wrong with it. They just said their eyes rolled. But I'm used to this. It means nothing to me, my friends. It means nothing. It only is a comment on them and the people who are frightened by this sort of stuff. So much for the fear not, all based on that. I want to comment on a word that, a kind thing that Rabbi Margolin said about me. I make so many Jews proud of their Jewishness. Yes, I think I have in the course of my life, and I am proud of that, but you will find this of interest. I've probably made at least as many people proud of their Christianity. And I've made at least double or triple the number of Americans proud of their Americanness, and hopefully 5 times that number proud of their being Westerners. Because the great tragedy of modern life is this. Jews didn't teach their children what it means to be a Jew. Christians didn't teach their children what it means to be a Christian. Americans didn't teach their children what it means to be an American. And Westerners have not taught their children what it means to be a member of Western civilization. That's the tragedy. And if you don't teach it, you lose it. It's as simple as that. So that when the President of the United States went to Warsaw 2 years ago and said we have to protect Western civilization, the New York Times said this was a dog whistle to white supremacy. Western civilization is now considered at the New York Times a euphemism for white supremacy. If you want to protect Western civilization, that means you want to protect white supremacy. That is how bad things have gotten. Is it any wonder then that vast numbers of Americans and Western Europeans, less so Eastern Europeans, and I told Romanians last year where I spoke in Cluj and Bucharest, I told them, you may save Europe. You may save the West. Eastern Europe might save the West, because I don't see where the salvation's coming from Western Europe. They have such contempt for themselves. At least you don't. Self-contempt is a worthy thing if you're worthy of contempt. But hey, if you gave the world the very notion of universal human rights didn't come from the non-West, no insult to the non-West, just a fact. It's either true or not true. Universal human rights emanated from here. Women's rights emanated from here. Universal democracy emanated from here. Okay? That's pretty big stuff. Slavery ended here. Everybody had slavery. So the only intelligent question, therefore one not asked at universities by definition, because it is intelligent, is not who had slaves, who abolished slavery. It's like the only intelligent question is not who's poor, who created wealth. Poor is the norm. Slavery was the norm. So the only intelligent question is, what is the abnorm? The abnorm, if you will, abnormal is to abolish slavery and abolish poverty. Who did that? Only capitalism has abolished poverty. Only the West abolished first slavery. And I might add, as a Jew, it was Christians who did it. Christians say it, they're accused of having an axe to grind. I don't. My axe to grind is truth. It was Christians who abolished slavery, and then it spread from there. But who learns this stuff? In the United States of America, George Washington owned slaves, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, the founders of the United States, the freest country in human history. They owned slaves, so they're held in contempt. So that's my work, is to teach people in the West what they stand for before we lose it. And we may very well lose it. We certainly aren't winning. Mr. Shale Baranowski said, I'm checking Bobrovnitsky. I like getting words correct. I love language. Everyone wants to blame right-wing groups for the anti-Semitism. God, to hear such truth at the European Parliament is worth the whole trip from America. I have to say it was mind-blowing. That's right. If not everyone wants to blame right-wing groups. The left wants to blame right-wing groups. Christians have co-sponsored this speech with a rabbi sitting to my left, your right, Christians over there. I learned very early in my life in America, the division was not between Jews and Christians, it was between the left and everybody else. The sooner you know that, the sooner you understand the modern world. If you don't understand that, you cannot morally or politically understand the modern world. That is the only division that matters. In America, there's no black-white division. Blacks and whites get along great in real life. The left hates when they get along great, because a happy black might vote Republican. If a woman thinks men are the enemy, she votes Democrat. If a woman thinks that men are divided among good and bad, just like women are divided among good and bad, and she blames the difficulties of life for her sadness, not men, she'll vote Republican. Happy people are not on the left. I never met a happy leftist, and I just turned 70. They do not exist. There are happy liberals, there are happy conservatives, there are unhappy liberals, and there are unhappy conservatives. But there are no happy leftists on earth. And as I say on my happiness hour every week, the happy make the world better and the unhappy make it worse. The unhappy make it worse. The left makes the world worse. Not liberals, not conservatives. Liberals don't have the courage to fight the left. There are some who do. There's an American professor from Harvard, Alan Dershowitz, lifelong liberal, Democrat, Hillary Clinton supporter, said to me in a movie that will be coming out in America later this year, No Safe Spaces, said to me in his apartment in New York, Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz, as an American, as a liberal, as a Democrat, as a Jew, I fear the left, not the right. That is correct. That is the only group decent people should fear, the left. They are crushing the West, the greatest hope that mankind had. The dark, dark world of humanity. They have really, the West, with all its flaws, has attempted to make this world better and has made it better. But to say that is, for the New York Times, a dog whistle for white supremacy, which is itself a racist comment, because Western values don't know color. I don't give a hoot about color. I don't think there's anybody at this dais who cares about color. We only care about values. But by the way, in America, the University of California, the largest state university in the United States, very prestigious, UCLA, UC Berkeley, and so on, they actually issued, you can see it, it's on the internet. They're proud of it. They have issued racist microaggression statements. In other words, statements that if you make are considered at the University of California in America to be racist. For example, there's only one race, the human race. That is considered racist at the University of California, to say there is only one race, the human race. That is how Orwellian the left has made the world, where if you deny the importance of race, you're the racist. But the last people to make race important were here on this continent, and I won't name their names, but we all know who they were. The greatest affirmers of the importance of race on earth today is the left in the West. The previous emphasizers of the importance of race were called Nazis. I'm not comparing the left to Nazis. They're not building concentration camps, death camps. They're not deporting anybody to death. I get that. It's a big distinction, never to be sneered at. I'm merely making a factual statement that until the left today, the greatest affirmers of the importance of race were the Nazis. The next greatest affirmers are the left. It's an astonishing thing to witness. So when I say race is as important to me, your skin color is as unimportant to me as your eye color or shoe color, I am called a racist. In fact, at the University of Wyoming in America, where I speak a lot of colleges in the United States, and there's always protests and so on. And at the University of Wyoming, the usual, oh, how could we invite this guy? He's a racist and, SIXHERB, sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, and bigoted. I gave it an acronym because it's said so often. So they added, though, because that wasn't enough, and an anti-Semite. Yeah, how do you like that? That's quite an achievement, not only for a Jew, but for a committed Jew. A Jew who's founded a synagogue, a Jew who founded a Jewish day school, a Jew who taught Jewish history at Brooklyn College, City University of New York, a Jew who fought anti-Semitism his whole life, a Jew sent in by Israel to the Soviet Union to smuggle in Jewish items so Jews could pray. I am an anti-Semite because that's what the left does. They don't have arguments, they have smears. They never argue. They can't argue. That's why they never come on our shows. We go on their shows on the rare occasions that we're invited. They never come on our shows because they know they can't debate us. Because we know their arguments, they don't know ours. They study under them, they go to their movies, they dine with them, they marry each other, they never meet us, they don't hear us. We hear them, you can't avoid them. You turn on the television, they're there. You read the major newspapers, they're there. So let me tell you about freedom. This is the first and most important thing that needs to be understood. Freedom is a value, not an instinct. Human beings do not yearn to be free. That is a common misconception. Human beings yearn to be taken care of, not to be free. Okay, that's critical. It's a value, not a yearning. By the way, guess where I learned that? Where I learned most of the wisdom that I have, and I believe I have some, and that is from the Bible. And I'm writing a 5-volume commentary on the Torah for people of every background. It's called the Rational Bible. I pray you'll read it. Nobody writes Bible commentaries to get wealthy, so I have no problem in asking you to read it. Could have written a lot other things that would have made more money. But I will just tell you, I learned this there. The Israelites leave Egypt, and what's the first thing they do? Complain. We had better food in Egypt. Is that correct, Rabbi? 100%. 100%. His mic was not on, so I'm telling you what he said. That's right. We had better food. This manna, they weren't starving in the desert, but they got tired of a daily dose of manna. So they said, hey, we ate better as slaves. Let's go back to slavery. That is exactly the human condition. I want to be taken care of is infinitely deeper than I want to be free. That is the appeal of the left. That is why the left wins, because the left appeals to human nature. We who love freedom do not appeal to human nature. We are fighting human nature. In America, a Republican runs or a Democrat runs and says, vote for us, this is what we'll do for you. A Republican runs and says, vote for us, we'll do less for you. Who wins? Right? People don't want freedom, they want money. They want free healthcare, free college, free high school, free everything free. I am convinced, and I mean the following literally, the addiction to things, the addiction to benefits is greater than the addiction to heroin. It is harder to break. I know a lot about drug addiction. It is breakable. It is not breakable, the addiction to benefits. Once it starts, no one is willing to give it up because they don't even think they're addicted. A heroin addict knows he's addicted. A benefits addict thinks he's entitled. That's why in America they're called entitlements. If you're entitled, how could it be bad? This is huge. Freedom is a value, not an instinct. People want to be taken care of. In effect, we have the difference between the American and French revolutions. American Revolution was for liberty, the French Revolution was for equality. I know they did liberté, égalité, and fraternité, but the liberté part was irrelevant. Once there's égalité, you could say au revoir to liberté. Okay? You say bye-bye, auf Wiedersehen, whatever your language is. Yes, I was just going to ask you. I really was, but I knew I wouldn't be able to repeat it. That was the problem. But the Kissanim Sepen, nevertheless. This is the battle. The French Revolution versus the American Revolution is the battle. Europeans went for the French Revolution. Equality, equality, equality. So yes, we guillotined a few people, so what? As Lenin said, you gotta crack eggs to make omelets. Well, that's it. America took the tougher road, freedom. And that's why the French ultimately gave the Statue of Liberty, not to itself, not to Britain, not to Germany, to America, because it was known as the land of liberty. Sweet land of liberty goes one of the most famous American songs, but that's dying. America has much less liberty than when I grew up as a child. There's no comparison. It is so much less free. It's breathtaking. And of course, it applies to freedom of speech. And Pew Research did a poll. This is not liberal, not conservative. Pew Research, it did a poll, found that 40% of young Americans do not believe in freedom of speech for hate speech. When I was a child, the Nazis, American Nazis, marched in Skokie, Illinois. You know why they marched in Skokie? Because there were a lot of Jewish Holocaust survivors living in Skokie. So these sadists, and you have to be a sadist to be a Nazi. It's not, I don't know if you cannot be a sadist and be a Nazi. It's a qualification. They went there to shove the swastika in the faces of people whose families had been exterminated. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, defended their right to march. So did Jewish groups. Because the liberal value is you can be despicable in America. You are free to be despicable with your words. That is the American value. That's real hate speech, not when I go to a college. The left calls everything it differs with hate speech, which is exactly what the Hungarian minister was talking about. And so that's what that was allowed in Illinois. They were allowed to march, and the Jews defended it, and the ACLU, because that's free speech. Because the moment you say the Nazis can't march in Skokie, well, where do you stop? So that's the American view. That's why in America you can deny the Holocaust. In Europe you can't deny the Holocaust. Because you've never had free speech like America has free speech. Never. It has never existed in Europe like it exists in the United States. That's a perfect example. Anyone who denies the Holocaust is scum. That is the definition of human scum. And I think they should be allowed to be scum. That's the way it works, because once you stop there, where do you start there? When do you stop? Because then if you say, hey, I don't think that Norway is right, that you should have 50% of boards of directors females, well, you can't say that. You're a misogynist, right? That's a perfect example, by the way, of equality versus freedom. Who the hell is the Norwegian government to tell a company how many women are going to be on its board? And by the way, why stop at women? Why not short people? I'm not kidding. There are disproportionately taller people on boards of directors. And I say that as a tall person. It's just not fair. It's endless. It's just endless. Who the hell is the Norwegian government to tell a company, a private company, who they will have on their board? Norwegians don't give a damn, however, about what I just said. It means nothing, because they don't care about freedom much in Norway, or Sweden, or Denmark, or this country. That's the way it is. It's not a big deal, freedom. Get it? So you could pass laws like that. It's only fair. No, it isn't fair. Fair is I get to choose who my directors are. That's fair. You are not going to define for me what is fair. But in Europe, it's accepted. Who's going to fight? Somebody has to fight for this. There are people up here fighting for it. Every European who fights for freedom, I tell you, I salute you. It's a tough continent. The left has a stranglehold on discourse here, much more than in America. I have been on radio for 35 years. I have millions of listeners. I am what's called in America talk show host. You don't have talk radio in Europe. And if you do, it's just another leftist repeat of what the BBC said. It's irrelevant. As Stephen Harper, the former Prime Minister of Canada, said to me at one of the Prager University conferences, let me tell you, the CBC is worse than CNN. CBC is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Freedom is not a value on the left. It just isn't. Maybe sexual freedom, but that's about it. Drugs freedom, but not any other. So you got to decide in Europe, and I'm not here to preach to you. I say this in America. We're losing this battle in America, but here I am in Europe. So you got to decide. Is freedom more important? Is liberty a major value or not? Or is taking care of you better? I remember George W. Bush running for president, and it was a public forum, and a woman got up and said, if you're elected president, what will you do for me? And I realized that's why I can't run for office, because I know what I would have said. Nothing. That would have been my answer, running for president. Madam, I will do nothing for you. And I hold that as a beautiful thing, because I don't care about what I will do for you. I care what I will do as president for America. That's what John F. Kennedy's famous line was in his inaugural address, when liberals were liberal and not leftists. John F. Kennedy said, ask not what you can do for your country, ask what your country can do for you. If somebody said that today, they'd be called a fascist. The New York Times would call such a politician a fascist. So we got a big decision to make on whether or not we value freedom. The Hungarian minister had the courage to speak about the Islamic immigration. You can't talk about the Islamic immigration in Europe or the United States. Are there great Muslims? Of course there are great Muslims. There are great Muslims, great Jews, great Christians, great atheists, great everything. Are there miserable of every group? Yes. However, Muslims are bringing with them different values, just like, and to prove it has nothing, of course, it has nothing to do with race, because there's no Muslim race. But secondly, I give a proof on my radio show. New Yorkers who emigrate to Florida do exactly the same thing to Florida that South Americans do to the United States and Muslim immigrants do to Europe. Change their values. People bring values with them. They may not bring money, but they do bring values. You know what? Jews are leaving Sweden. You know why Jews are leaving Sweden? Not because of Swedes, but because of Muslim immigrants. That's why. Jerusalem Post reported it. The New York Times didn't report it because it goes against what the Times wants you to believe, that this is just a hunky-dory immigration. Everything's working out great. Angela Merkel, I'm shaking my head not out of contempt, out of sadness, just out of sadness. Angela Merkel proves a famous Jewish teaching that I learned in yeshiva as a child, and that is Judaism holds you're born with two wills, a good will and a bad will, Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Ra. So the rabbis of the Talmud, the second holiest book in Judaism, asked, why did God make a bad urge? Why didn't he just make a good urge? And then the rabbis answered, because without a bad urge, a man wouldn't marry, wouldn't make a home, wouldn't take a profession. So I realized as a kid, sounds like the bad urge is a pretty damn good thing. And it is. The good urge gets, as a rabbi said to me when I was in my late 20s, I went to him for advice, Rabbi Wolf Kelman, may he rest in peace. He said to me, Dennis, I got to tell you something. I got my bad urge under control. It's my good urge that gets me in trouble. That's Angela Merkel. She's a living embodiment of that. We screwed up in the Holocaust, so we'll undo the damage and let in 1 million people who share none of our values. Isn't that beautiful? Because people work on feelings much more than reason. That's what happened. So, that's what they said in Sweden. Hey, you know, a former Swedish minister was asked about Swedish values. You know what she said? Swedish values? What are those? That's when you really didn't teach your children what your country stands for. When a minister of your country says, I don't know what our values are. In England, they prosecute a Christian clergy who won't perform a same-sex marriage. It's mind-boggling. Until 10 years ago, there was no such thing as same-sex marriage in secular life. Within 10 years, it's an astonishing thing. You are a hater if you think that marriage should be defined male or female. I happen to believe neither side is haters. There are good people who believe in same-sex marriage. There are good people who believe in male-female marriage. They can't say that because the left knows only they are good. It is not possible to differ with the left and be a decent human being. It is not possible. Should we have changed it? I was against changing it. A, because I do take my values from the Bible, but even if I were secular, I knew that there was a very damaging argument on the same-sex marriage issue. And the argument was very simple. It was gender doesn't matter. And as soon as I heard that, I said, you've got to be kidding. Gender doesn't matter? And now look what's happened. Gender really doesn't matter. In the United States of America, routinely in high schools in the United States, male bodies who consider themselves female run against female bodies and win all the races. Not one feminist group in America has spoken out against this. Only Martina Navratilova, who is a lesbian, great tennis champion, she said this is not fair to women to have male bodies who consider themselves transgender females compete against female bodies. She was kicked out of the LGBTQ movement for saying that. A lifelong lesbian activist kicked out because, hey, gender doesn't matter. Gender doesn't matter. You really believe that? But you can't say what I'm saying in good parts of Europe. This is considered hate speech. What is hateful about it? that I think women should be only racing against women, biological women. Why is that hate? Why isn't it hatred of women to allow male bodies to win the races? Why isn't that hate? Nationalism. This is the new one. Nationalism is racism, et cetera, et cetera. Folks, nationalism is good when it is good and bad when it is bad. Just like anything else. Almost nothing is intrinsically bad or good. Is war good? Yes, the war against the Nazis was good. The war of the Nazis against the West was bad. Some wars are moral, some wars are immoral. Sometimes nationalism is moral, sometimes it's immoral. You can't even say that in leftist company. Nationalism is racism. I don't know what they're talking about. I think it's wonderful that a Bulgarian is proud of Bulgaria. I think that's healthy. I like it. I've asked every European young person I've come into contact in the last 2 weeks with 200 of my listeners from America that I've taken on the Rhine River. And I've asked every young European a question. So if he was Dutch, I would say, do you first feel Dutch or European? If he was German, do you first feel German or European? Whatever it might be, I'm just curious. I want them to say, first I feel, this is just a feeling even. It's good, it's healthy to feel that. It doesn't mean anything to feel European. And by the way, why is that not noble? Why is that noble? You don't feel Asian. Why isn't that exclusive? Why is feeling European noble, but feeling Albanian is ignoble? I want to know. I have no one's ever given me an answer. You're exclusive if you're European. That means you don't feel North American. Oh, I am hurt. I am devastated. Now, why is that? No, seriously, why is that any more noble than feeling Albanian or Hungarian or French? I don't get it. It is a beautiful thing to have commitment to a specific people. It is a beautiful thing. If you're only committed to your people, you are truly reprehensible. But if you are only committed to humanity, you're worthless. That's why the Bible, again, my favorite book, says love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't say love everyone as yourself. You know why? It's easy to love everyone. It's hard to love your neighbor. It's called the Rational Bible. That's in volume 2. These are big deals. We live in the age of foolishness. We do. Everything I have said to you is obvious. I used to say on the radio, I gave up. Until about 10 years ago, I used to say every so often, folks, it's incredible how much money I am paid to say the obvious. That's what I felt. I couldn't believe it. What a lucky guy. I make a good living as a talk show host in America, and I say the obvious every day. Everything I have said to you should be obvious. It's a good thing to feel French. It's a good thing to feel an obligation to your fellow Hungarians. Why is that a bad thing? I don't get it. I don't know. Why is it better to feel just European or just a human being? Do you know that Superman gave up his American citizenship? Superman was founded in the 1930s in America by Jewish cartoonists who were liberals. And his motto was truth, justice, and the American way. That was Superman's motto. The leftists who took over Superman dropped the motto, no more American way. Now he stood in front of the United Nations about 8 years ago in the cartoon strip and said, I am no longer American, I am a citizen of the world. That's the left versus liberal. Perfect example. Liberals celebrated truth, justice, and the American way. And by the way, if Dutch celebrate truth, justice, and the Dutch way, I'm all for Dutch Superman. I am. I think it would be a great thing. Limited government. You can't have freedom if you have big government. The bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. I came up with that phrase years ago, was apparently quoted by a Supreme Court justice, not using my name, but it didn't matter. The left already attacked him for quoting Dennis Prager. It is hilarious. I just saw it yesterday. But yes, I came up with this phrase, and it's true. The bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. That's exactly right. We are big if the government isn't. We become cogs, but it's people don't care if they're cogs. They don't care if they are small. They care if they're fed well and get things for free, and that nobody has more than them. That really bugs the left. Never bothered me that my neighbor had a Cadillac. It's true, I swear to you. My neighbor in Brooklyn, New York, he had a Cadillac. My poor father had an Oldsmobile, which you may not have heard of either. Well, Cadillac you've certainly heard of. In America, when I grew up, there were 5 GM cars: Cadillac, Buick, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, and Chevrolet. And everyone knew your income by which one you drove. We drove Oldsmobiles because we were the middle of the middle of the middle class. My neighbor drove a Cadillac. It never occurred to anybody in my family to resent Mr. Klein. I never knew his first name because as kids in my age, you only called adults Mr. and Mrs. Not anymore. Hi, I'm Jerry. This is the way adults say hello to kids. But this is a new thing to me. You resent people who are richer than you? Why is that? The old American attitude to the rich was, gee, how do I get rich? Now, it's let's make the rich poor. Big difference. That's the European attitude. And now it's become the American attitude. Freedom, finally. There's so much to talk to you, but I want to hear questions from you. And, or even alternate small, brief speeches. I don't care, that's fine with me. The Liberty Bell of the United States is the most iconic symbol of the American Revolution. It's called the Liberty Bell. I don't expect you to know it, but every American knows it. Do you know what is written on the Liberty Bell? Only one thing, a verse from the Torah. And you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants, from the book of Leviticus. Nobody even knows what Leviticus is today. If I said to somebody, which I am, I'm writing a commentary on Leviticus, they would probably think it's an Italian food or something else. They would have no idea. Leviticus? What is Leviticus? They not only knew what Leviticus was, they knew Leviticus, the founders of America. You had to know Hebrew to get a BA from Harvard until 1800. The insignia of Yale University is in Hebrew, Urim v'Tumim, what the chief priest in the Bible would wear on his breastplate, in Hebrew, on the Yale University insignia. America's changed radically from a Judeo-Christian country to a secular left country. It is not a better country for doing so. And it is certainly not a freer country. The Liberty Bell was for liberty, and they said God wants us to have liberty. That's pretty powerful. So this is where we're at, and the things are quite troubling here in Europe and in America. The free speech issue is just unbelievable. Prager University is what I am the president of, obviously named after me. I'm very touched. It wasn't my idea, but I accepted the honor. And anyway, we have 1 billion views a year. We're the largest conservative video site on earth. We are seen all over the world. That's why I lectured in Romania last year to 1,500 young people in Cluj and Bucuresti. And it's a wonderful thing that we're doing. It needs to be done much, much more. Do you know that YouTube, which is owned by Google, has put 80 of our 400 videos. We put out a video every single week of 5 minutes. They're all 5 minutes long. We have 4 prime ministers who have done videos for us, liberal professors, conservative professors. It's a very distinguished group of people who've done videos for us. And 80 of them are lumped with pornography on the restricted list of YouTube. Google owns YouTube. 80. Example, Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor, liberal, Democrat, gave a 5-minute talk on the founding of Israel was legal. That's it, just the legality of Israel's founding. And he even said he's against settlements. We don't care. You can have your opinion on our website. And that's on the, anything that defends America is on the restricted list. What is a restricted list? If your family has filters against pornography and violence, then you can't see anything that's on restricted list. So along with pornography and gratuitous violence are 80 Prager University videos. We have sued them. I hope it goes to the Supreme Court of the United States. The Wall Street Journal wrote 4 editorials on us last year because it's the biggest example of the suppression of speech. Anything that the left differs with is immediately on the suppressed list. Immediately. They don't care when we have a psychiatrist give a talk on how you should forgive your parents if you can. That's okay. That they allowed through. But anything the left differs with is suppressed. If they could, they would shut us down immediately. We're too big. But they're working their way up. The left has never valued liberty, ever. Liberals value liberty. Conservatives value liberty. The left has never valued it. Since Stalin called Trotsky a fascist, all they know how to do is smear and destroy their opponents. That's it. That's all they know to do. That's why if you say, I want to protect the West, you're called a white supremacist. Is that unbelievable? If you say there's only one race, the human race, you're a racist. Because then you deny the left's belief that black is important. Black is not important. White is not important. Anyway, the idiocy of how could somebody like myself, how could any Jew be a white supremacist? Who killed the Jews? Weren't the Nazis white? The idea is so preposterous. A Jewish white supremacist? Think about it for a second, how moronic that is. What color were the Nazis? Green? You understand? The lies are so intense, the suppression of our other views is so great and successful that everything I'm telling you is like a breath of fresh air because you don't get to hear it. And because conservative organizations, by and large, are too weak to fight, they're worthless. Like the conservative organization that I learned just recently backed out of sponsoring me. I don't even know why. You heard me now. What did I say that violates one conservative principle or one liberal principle? To say there are black dormitories at American universities. Do you know who support that? The left. You know who else supports that? The Ku Klux Klan. The only people to support black dormitories on campuses are the leftists and white racists like the Ku Klux Klan. Liberals don't support it and conservatives don't support it. The left in Harvard, they have separate graduation ceremonies for blacks. That's what they did yes, Harvard. I'm glad you look disgusted. It's good. Carry the disgust out of the room for at least 2 days, and it would have been worth coming to Brussels. This is what they do on American campuses. Black dorms, black graduations. I was raised as a liberal. How could I not be? I was a Jewish New Yorker. And I was taught that racial integration is the ideal. And now I'm taught racial segregation is the ideal. So that's the story. I ask you to value freedom. Everything emanates from that. The Liberty Bell should be all of our icons, and it wouldn't hurt to put a verse from the Bible on it. Europe is the most godless continent in the history of humanity. It's an experiment. Europe is engaged in an experiment. Can we maintain our values with a dead God, with no God? I am certain. If I were an atheist, I would be certain it will not work. It's a very, very arrogant belief. We got our values from this book We got our values from people who believed in a God who gave the Ten Commandments, but we don't need the Ten Commandments or that book or that God anymore because we are enlightened Europeans or Americans. It's a real radical experiment. There has never existed a civilization without a God. It's quite an attempt. I don't think it'll work. Thanks for having me. Thank you.